Last week, we talked with Major Danny Schertzen about a number of issues, including Syria and Donald Trump's proclamation that he would withdraw troops from Syria. Now, as we struggled with, or as I struggled with last week, there's a question of what do you do when a president you fundamentally oppose is proposing something that you think might be a good idea. I want to explore that a little bit further because I think it's a mistake to reflexively respond to any events or to forget our core values when it comes to matters as important as war and peace. And now it's a moving target, as everything is with Donald Trump, what's going on there right now in terms of his thinking about Syria is hard to discern. But I thought we'd explore the issue a little further with our friend Stephen Miles. Stephen is the executive director of Win Without War, a diverse coalition of 40-member organizations formed in opposition to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the underlying national security strategy or mythology, however you want to put it, that created them. So with that, Stephen Miles, thanks for coming back on the program.
Good to be here, and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you. So, okay, so Syria. I struggle, as I mentioned in my introduction, with the contradiction. It seems to me that overall the idea of withdrawing troops from Syria is actually a good idea. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we have to separate out two things. And one is whether or not the U.S. should have military forces on the ground in Syria. Me and my organization have long felt that we should not. We opposed sending them there when Barack Obama sent them there, and we support bringing them home now that Donald Trump is the president. But we also have to ask ourselves, what is the totality of what the president is doing? Because whether or not U.S. troops should be in Syria on the ground fighting in a war that does not have military solutions to the problems that are driving it is one part of the question. But the other part of the question is, what should we be doing? And here's where we both, on one hand, have an answer that is, we have no idea what this administration is doing. And on the other hand, the things we do know are disconcerting and create some real problems.
So, yeah, and here's what bothered me about the whole, the way things unfolded in the conversation when Trump initially said that he wanted to immediately withdraw these troops from Syria. Here's what bothered me about it. There was a reflexive, because so many people who would be considered friends and pretty much allies on many issues of people like you and me, I'd say, for lack of a better term, because of the hatred towards Trump, there was this reflexive, well, if he's doing it, it must be bad, which must mean that all these members of the national security establishment that I'm seeing on TV criticizing him, they're right, and they must be the people I should be following, when in fact all those people who went on TV to condemn this decision, by and large, were the people that, I'll speak for myself, that I've been fighting for decades, people who are part of a misguided national security establishment that led us into bad wars in Iraq and elsewhere, that has failed to get us out of Afghanistan after 17 years, that has been spending money hand over fist on weapons systems and interventions that do nothing, in my view, to make any American people or any people happier or safer. And that all of a sudden everybody was the people that I knew that might be allies in other circumstances, suddenly let's line up behind these people and follow them. And I thought, boy, that's going to be a terrible, there are going to be terrible long-term consequences for picking the wrong allies just because they disagree with Trump on an issue. You get what I'm driving at, right?
Yeah, I absolutely do. Look, I mean, you're seeing folks like Max Boot out there now regularly contributing to CNN, and is often, because of his opposition to Donald Trump, somehow lifted up by a number of Democrats and other progressives as some sort of hero of the resistance, or pointed to. Folks like Jen Rubin, a major neocon and hawk, who has a column in the Washington Post, who criticizes the president regularly, and then folks who oppose the president politically look to them and point to the things they're saying when they've been saying the wrong thing for 30 years, right? And so it's a real problem that we have, that folks are kind of reflexively going to a place of partisan opposition of the president and then listening to critiques that they disagree with and buying into those critiques. So I think we have to understand when that's happening. And we also have to understand there's a lot of different critiques out there of what the president's doing. Some of them, frankly, I think a lot of us agree with. Some of them we disagree with. Again, there are a lot of folks for whom the U.S. military is always the solution, no matter the problem. Folks like John Bolton and Lindsey Graham do not see a problem in the world that they do not believe American bombs cannot solve. They've been wrong for as long as they've been saying that, and they're still wrong today when they're opposed to things like maybe ending our military mission in Syria. But there's a number of other folks who are rightly concerned about things like the status of the Kurdish forces and Kurdish civilians in northeastern Syria, folks who are concerned with the humanitarian condition or situation and what happens on the ground in Syria going forward. They look at what the president's doing and they say, this is going to make a humanitarian situation worse. And while the solution to that concern is not to keep U.S. troops there indefinitely for a military mission that Congress has never authorized and that the military is ill-equipped to perform, quite frankly, there nonetheless is a genuine concern about what the president's doing and how it's going to impact the situation on the ground. The solution to that is not to send more U.S. troops or keep the troops that are there forever. The solution to that is a humanitarian and diplomatic surge that ends the war, prevents further war crimes, and brings about accountability for the war crimes that have happened. Simply adding 2,000 soldiers or keeping 2,000 soldiers on the ground isn't going to stop war crimes in the next 5 years any better than it stopped them in the last 5 years. But that nonetheless doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned about war crimes in Syria.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, it's striking to me that while the concern that you and I share, concern for the Kurds, concern for other humanitarian problems that, by the way, lest we forget, have largely arisen, this entire situation has largely arisen because we listened to some of the people you just listed, the Max Boots and the other neocons out there who destabilized an entire region. Now we're dealing with the consequences of that. The fact is that the people that are being elevated, in certain democratic circles because they oppose Trump, these aren't the people out there talking about the kinds of solutions you just described that would really help the people there. Massive humanitarian intervention, diplomatic action. Right now, nothing's being done. For example, as we record this on Thursday, as I understand it, President Erdogan in Turkey is threatening to initiate military action and bombings against the Kurds, whether the troops are moved away or not. He's just saying, well, okay, I'm enough fooling around, I'm going to start attacking these people. No, I don't see any diplomatic initiatives to stop that. So I guess the question then for people like you and me leaves us with, okay, we get it. We don't think troops are the answers to every problem, including this problem. We think a troop reduction is a good idea. We think humanitarian and diplomatic initiatives are desperately needed. How do we make that case? How do we make the counter-argument for what seemed to be the Trumpian disorganized side, where he occasionally hits on a proper idea like troop drawdown, but without any context, diplomatically or humanitarian, and then these other people who are just beating the drums for war once again?
Yeah, look, we can't make the president do the right thing. As much as we want to, the president's proving right now on a host of other issues that he is not going to listen to reason. He's not going to listen to logic. He's going to do whatever it is he wants. But we can do a better job of understanding what the wrong thing is and how the actions that this president, and quite frankly, those presidents before him, as you said, have taken in the region are the problems, not the solution. So inevitably, we're going to see, unfortunately, more tragedy, more death, more destruction in Syria and in other parts of the Middle East. And the problem is going to be the very folks we're talking about who are condemning Donald Trump for taking 2,000 troops out of Syria now are going to say the whole problem was we didn't have those 2,000 troops there. That means the solution is to put 2,000 more troops or even more back in. We have to start to recognize that military force, a violence-first foreign policy towards the region, is the problem. We're going on nearly 3 decades of military action in Iraq. of bombing Iraq, of having an invasion of Iraq, of having tens of thousands of troops on the ground in Iraq, of having big footprint, little footprint. We've tried every kind of war there is to try. And Iraq, right next to Syria, is a wildly unstable place that has a significant amount of security challenges, and in fact led to some of the instability we see in Syria now. If we allow this narrative to continue going forward, that the problem is that Barack Obama took a couple thousand troops out of Syria or out of Iraq when he was president, or Donald Trump took a couple thousand troops out when he was president from Syria, we're going to end up going right back in and doing more of the very thing that's actually causing the problem. So we have to start doing the right thing, which is recognizing where the real problem is, and that is having a violence-first, military-first foreign policy towards the region that is causing immense human suffering, is not resolving the underlying conflicts, is not solving the underlying extremism that we're seeing, and is doing nothing to breed the kind of stability that everybody wants to see.
So, Stephen Miles, I couldn't agree more. And here's the problem we're up against, and we talked about this on the show a little bit last week, which is we're now, you hit the nail on the head, that anytime there's a problem from now on, it's going to be blamed on the withdrawal of 2,000 troops here or 2,000 troops there. We've gotten into this crazy situation where, it used to be you had to justify military intervention, to define what the mission was and how you would know when it had been accomplished. Now you have to justify absence of military intervention. It's a wacky inversion, and everything that happens will be blamed on your absence of military intervention. So nobody is saying, well, what's the purpose of these 2,000 troops? When will we know that they've accomplished their mission? It's how dare you pull them out? You get what I'm trying to say, right? I mean, the whole, so when we get to the concrete problem of ending this violence versus first policy, as you put it, how do we resist this political culture and media culture that says, well, violence is the default and you have to justify any variation from the default?
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head, and we're about to have an interesting opportunity to do just that. The Democrats have taken back control of the House of Representatives, and that means they're going to have the chance to weigh in and legislate and provide oversight in a way that the House of Representatives has not done at all since the Republicans took control of it back in 2010. And there's a simple thing that needs to happen with an understanding of the very paradigm that we're living in, because you're talking, you hit the nail on the head. We have to now try to justify the absence of war, the absence of military might. We have to go back and look at that decision in the days after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, where the Bush administration said, we are going to put our country on a war footing. We are going to approach this problem with a global mentality of war, and we are going to engage in preventative war, not preemptive war. We're not going to say, here's a threat, and we're going to stop that threat, and when that threat's gone, we're going to no longer be at war. They said, we are going to war against the very idea of people who don't like us and want to do us harm. How do you know when that's over? How do you know when people cross the threshold from just disliking America to wanting to do damage to America? How do you go from a situation that we have now where we are literally bombing country after country after country with special operations forces on the ground? We are directly engaging in war, or we are supporting other countries engaging in war, all in the name of this quote-unquote war on terror that still 18 years after it first started persists. We have to begin to question and change that paradigm. The House of Representatives under Democrats are going to have the opportunity. They were stymied in the last Congress by beginning that conversation, and the beginning of that conversation starts with repealing that authorization for the use of military force, the so-called AUMF, that war authorization that's the founding document of that paradigm. It passed less than 3 days after 9/11, and the Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who I know your listeners of your show will know, was famously the lone voice against that. She has been fighting to repeal that. She was blocked in the last Congress from doing that, and she's going to now have an opportunity to do that very thing and start that conversation. And we're going to have to see what House Democrats do.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And let me ask you this. How do people who are concerned about this issue, as I am and as you are, how do people get involved, whether it's, I guess the best way to get involved, but you tell me, I would think, is to pressure your representative to do exactly that. So how do people get involved and stay involved?
I think they have to do, there's easy things they can do, like check out our organization online, winwithoutwar.org. But we're going to have a national conversation over the next 2 years leading up to the 2020 elections. There's about to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 Democrats running for president. And they're all going to be asking activists and voters to support them. And we're going to have an unprecedented opportunity to engage them directly, whether that's people in Iowa, New Hampshire, folks in California, which are going to have an early primary this year, but more broadly, the conversation that's going to take place around that election. We have to ensure that that conversation is not only just about truly important issues like healthcare, about our tax system, about our economy, but also about this question of endless war. What are these folks who want to become the next president, the next commander-in-chief? What are their plans to end our nation's endless war? How are they going to end endless war? How are they going to stop the spigot of flow into the Pentagon that has cost this country $5.6 trillion, exact number, over $5 trillion of money on this endless war? How are they going to stop that? That's a question we have to be asking. That's a conversation we have to be asking. And there's no better time than right now to begin that.
Well, that's a fantastic way to put it. And by the way, the phrase end endless war is a pretty good one, too. So we should remember that one. But so is Win Without War. So Stephen Miles, Executive Director of Win Without War, thanks so much for your great work in this area. And as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for the conversation. Look forward to being back.
And we look forward to having you.